Welcome, everyone, and welcome to the show. Apologies for the slight delay there. Welcome to another episode of The Big Idea. We have a very special program for you today. Today, we are focused on human trafficking. This is a huge priority for the US government, and we know that we need a lot of people to join us in order to be successful in this fight, in this battle to counter human trafficking. Perhaps some of you have seen that the Biden administration in 2021 released a national action plan to counter human trafficking. We'll be sure to put a link in the description below. And what the US government understands is that there are several ways that we need to approach this challenge. And that includes 4 Ps. That's prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. And that last word is really key, partnership. We understand that we need to work with multilateral entities and countries throughout Southeast Asia if we are going to respond together to find a solution. So I have 2 great guests for you today to discuss human trafficking. One is Puthborey Phon from Cambodia. Welcome. He's the director of the Legal Protection Department of Cambodia's Ministry of Women's Affairs. And we also have with us Naj Kifli, who will be telling us today all about Youth Against Slavery Brunei. So they have a lot to tell us, and we have a lot of questions to ask. I hope if you have questions for our guests today, you will add them to the chat room, and we'll be sure to have time to get to them. But first, let's start with some presentations by our guests. We're going to start with Put. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to the UN, the US ASEAN to the ASEANs, especially Mr. Jason Samos for having me today on the special episodes on National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Of course, trafficking in person is not immune. No country is immune from this heinous crime, especially during the COVID-19 pandemics. We can see in some countries that the trafficking in persons cases has increased. So before to set the tone for our discussions today, and hopefully I can answer to your question, Justin Samos, and also to the audience for our discussions today, I want to say out 3 points. That first is the trafficking in person situations before the COVID-19 pandemics. And the second point, how the COVID-19 or how the pandemic have exacerbated the trafficking cases and especially increased the vulnerabilities to human trafficking. And the third one is I'm going to talk my proposed study because at the moment I am about to conduct a study to look at the new trends of human trafficking, but looking from the gender lens. So first of all, the trafficking cases, Cambodian trafficking cases in Cambodia before the COVID-19 pandemics. Cambodia is, is a source and transit countries of the trafficking in persons. A source countries that Cambodian women are trafficked to other countries for sexual exploitations, forced marriage, labor exploitations, and while men are trafficked to basically for commercial fishing industries and also in the constructions, and children are trafficked for bankings and vending on the streets. Selling flowers and things like that. And the transit countries, which is some foreign migrants are transported through Cambodia before being exploited in other countries, especially some countries in Asia. And the destinations countries that, women and children of foreign countries are trafficked to Cambodia for sexual exploitations. And the new emerging issue regarding to trafficking in persons in Cambodia is, traffic victim are deceived or enticed to come to Cambodia with promising jobs to work at the casinos, and then they end up, to camp at a place and then for labor exploitations. And for the trafficking cases Cambodian that we have encounters include sexual exploitations, labor exploitations, organ trafficking, fake marriage, surrogacies, which is a new emerging issues as well after a few countries in Asia ban the commercial surrogacies, and then some trafficker try to get into Cambodia for this lucrative business. And also the new form, which also a new form of trafficking, is the online sexual trafficking, which is I would say the incident is rated high, especially during the COVID-19 pandemics, because traffickers try to use technology, use online platforms to deceive women and girls into sexual exploitations. The second point is the trafficking in person situations during the COVID-19 pandemics. Interestingly, Cambodians that I had said earlier, many people would have thought that because of the precaution measures, administrative measures include lockdowns. So people might have thought that the trafficking cases during COVID-19 may decrease, but actually it's not. I look at the data, and trafficking cases has almost doubled compared to 2020s and 2019s. And especially the new form that I said earlier is related to forced marriage and online sexual exploitations. And also another form is the forced marriage that lately we have seen many women's victims who cry out through media platform for help, and then we have intervened and have them from the countries of destinations. And we can see that the COVID-19 pandemics not only increased the trafficking cases, but the pandemic had hardly hit on the economic engine of Cambodia, including the tourism, services and constructions, manufacturing, with many women concentrated in these sectors. And these sectors are hardly hit by the COVID-19 pandemics. Like I said earlier, these repercussions can increase the vulnerability for women and girls, and they can get trapped into the trafficking or tied into trafficking in persons. Another problem is the return migrant workers. In the last 2 years, there are more than 200,000 of returnees from destinations country, especially the neighboring countries, especially Thailand. Because some migrants, they lost the jobs, they do not have money, so the remittance that sent from these migrants workers are also decreased. These factors, adverse factors, come up with resulting in my studies that I'm going to look at the trends of human trafficking during the COVID-19 pandemics. I come up with these 3 hypotheses that the first one, my study is going to probe how the trafficking cases increase during the pandemics and what are the new trends besides that I have mentioned earlier. And the second one, how the trafficker can, they change the modus operandi to entire victim into trafficking in persons, and besides using the online platforms. And the third hypothesis is that I think after the COVID-19 pandemics, because lately some countries, especially around Asean, tried to looking for possibility to open borders, and especially this will increase the demand, because there is no doubt that migrant workers are, driving force for the economy. So there's a demanding factors that can push and also pull migrant workers to work in other countries. So I think that after the COVID-19 pandemics, the number of migrants will increase, thereby also increasing the vulnerability and also the cases of human trafficking in person. So how the government of Cambodia or other country of other country of origins, working in tandem with the country. These 3 points that set the tone for our discussions, and then look forward and welcomes to questions from you, Mr. Jason, and also from the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Put. And as you were speaking, I already thought of 5 questions I wanted to ask you. So I have plenty I'm curious about, but I'm going to allow a member of our audience to ask the first question. And it's an answer I'll ask to both of you. So it'll be a good segue to Put, to Naj. But I'll let you answer first, Put. This is from one of our fans, Skylar Lay. Nice to see a question from you, Skylar. Skylar wants to know if you could define the term modern slavery in a way that anyone could understand. And why do you think people don't understand that they play a role in supporting human slavery, combating human slavery? Help our audience understand the role they play and what modern slavery is.
To me, modern slavery here is like, victim are, for example, in the fishing industry, actually, maybe I forgot the year. I was too young at this time. Maybe in 1999, I was around 14 years old. And then I heard a story by a best friend of mine who worked in Thailand, who worked at the Sea of Thailand in the fishing industry. And he told me how he suffered during the sea. He worked like, more than 40 hours in 2 days. And for like 6 months, never see the shore and, never get back to the lands. And first time when you enter the boat, they don't care whether you know how to swim or not. If you cannot swim, they will throw you in the sea, and then you can learn themselves. You can learn yourself how to swim and how to survive. And they have no right to, they have no right to control of the life. Actually, the life are under the hand of the captains. And more than 3 or 4 years, he ended up to lift the boats, and then he survived and end up having nothing, no money at all, except the sufferings, and also, especially the psychological sufferings, and also mentality. He also the drug abusers as well. But I was too young at the time, and I did not know that it's a trafficking until starting working on the subjects. And then I came back and I reflect to my old story. Then I said, oh, it's you have no control on your life. You just work for free. You work without rest. Like I said earlier, more than 40 hours a day. More than 40 hours in 2 days. You are forced to use drugs to continue their works. So, this is a slavery to me, and this is modern slavery. Yeah, that's my explanation. Yeah.
That's an excellent example. Really, yeah. I really felt
a real
that.
example, and it still shocked me. And then when I reflect back to the story.
Yeah. Well, I want Naj to answer this question as well. And I know that Youth Against Slavery Brunei is very active to combat slavery as well. So please give our audience your definition of modern slavery, and then please share with us your presentation, Naj. Naj, you might be muted. I think you are muted.
Hello?
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
Please continue. Please start over.
Right. Okay, so for modern day slavery, I think the word slavery itself, when people hear it, the connotation is that slavery means being shackled or not being able to move because you are tied somewhere. So because of this mindset that people always think to be enslaved, one have to be tied physically. But in reality, the modern day slavery is not just about being shackled physically, but also in a way that you are not allowed to move around at your own free will. So for example, there are many forms of human trafficking that evolve um, these days. For example, when workers do not have access to their own personal identity documents, so that can be considered as victims of trafficking or modern day slavery. And then, as Mr. Put have already mentioned, there's also cases where they're not able to have proper rest days. And then there's firstly the being made to work without rest and long hours. And then being, as Mr. Put already mentioned, being put in a place where they have no place to exit, such as the fishing vessel. So yeah, so that's the definition for me on what modern slavery is. So I would like to introduce a little bit about youth against slavery in Brunei. So I will be sharing my screen. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
So YAS Brunei it is a short for Youth Against Slavery Brunei, and it is a Bruneian youth initiative under the YCL umbrella, which focus on raising awareness on human trafficking and modern day slavery. Our objective has always been on raising awareness, and as mentioned before by Mr. Jason, that there is the prevention, protection, persecution, as well as partnerships. So we see the importance of raising awareness first because the forms of human trafficking is still quite misunderstood in a way that people always assume that human trafficking is equals to human smuggling, where in fact it's not necessarily true. And then there is also objective to advocate against human trafficking and modern day slavery by promoting safe migration, as well as for advocating for decent work for migrant workers in Brunei. And then we also see the importance of us having a partnership between those who are already in the works of combating human trafficking in Brunei, as well as those who are supplying this migrant workers in Brunei. So we believe in creating engagement, as well as improving the visibility of migrant workers in Brunei through power of stories, as well as to start a conversation between migrant workers and the locals in Brunei. So a little bit of what we do. We usually have the outreach programs where we visit schools and organize talks. So because we believe that it's important for the young people to be exposed to this information right from as they're younger. So we have this school visits as well as awareness exhibitions. And then we also organize networking events, organizing dialogue conference and trainings, as well as attending meetings to contribute to the trafficking, combating human trafficking initiative in Brunei. And then we also highlight some migrant workers' contribution through our programs. Such programs are like Stories of Migrant series, fundraising, as well as donation events, as well as policy advocacy in terms of being involved and contributing to the TIP report, for example, as well as the Asean level meetings. So right at the start, when as part of our initiative, we usually do our community outreach via fundraising events. So where we fundraise in order to be able to bring in basic necessity hampers to migrant workers all over Brunei. The reason why we're doing this is because we wanted to improve the visibility of migrant workers in Brunei, and because they're often not very visible. And then there's also the somewhat segregated the locals and then migrant workers, the communities, and it's not usually well integrated. So we wanted to have that pathway by doing this kind of activities where we not just give out basic necessities, but also we hand out human trafficking indicators infographics. So while delivering these leaflets, we also start the conversation on creating awareness on human trafficking, as well as sharing with them the hotline numbers in case they are in need of help. And also, they are also those who are vulnerable. And then most of the time, they don't even know that they are victim of human trafficking themselves. So these indicators are important for them to know, so that they know that they are actually a victim and can actually get help. So far through this engagement, we have engaged over 6,000 individuals across Brunei. And then we also see the need for the message or the information to get across as efficient and effective as possible. So we have these leaflets on the indicators where we actually translated it in various languages, particularly on languages which are familiar to the majority of the migrant workers in Brunei. So we have it in English, Bahasa Indonesia, Tagalog, Bengali. I think there's also Urdu and Hindi as well. So that they will feel more inclusive because their message will get to them. And then during COVID as well, there are a need for information with regards to COVID-19 situation, particularly in Brunei, because they too need to get update information, but most of the information that are available are often not in the language that they understand. So what happened was we actually also developed the leaflets on awareness on COVID-19 situation in multiple languages, and we made it available online on social media, as well as printed and handed out while we're doing the outreach program. So during COVID-19 situation as well, there's a lot of people who are unfortunately impacted with the situation. A lot of businesses have to close down, a lot of services have to close down as well. So we see there's vulnerabilities also impacting a lot of migrant workers in Brunei. So what we did was we organized this there's initiatives where we do we raise funds to hand out basic necessities hampers to those who are impacted, particularly our barbers, masseurs, and those who are working in the service industry who have to close down businesses during the COVID situation. And we managed to, I think, reach about $23,622 Brunei through our initiatives, and also the need for masks as well. We set the goal to hand out about 100 reusable masks to migrant workers, and we managed to pull up 4,260 miles altogether. And then there's also the Lakas Membantu initiative, where we focus not just on the migrant workers, but also on frontliners, as well as those who are patient of COVID-19, because those who got infected with COVID-19, it doesn't really choose the nationalities and all that. So there are also cases where migrant workers in Brunei are infected with COVID-19, and then not like local who can get things delivered to them during quarantine and all that. So a lot of these migrant workers who are infected, they are sometimes not really, they are quite ill-equipped with basic necessities. They are in need of blankets, they need of personal hygiene products. So with this initiative, we were able to deliver this to these workers who are infected with COVID-19. And then we also need see the needs for the partnership within what we are doing. So we see the need to collaborate with the enforcement agencies with regards to combating trafficking in Brunei. So what happened is, during most of our events, we invite enforcement agencies like the police force or the immigration and labor department to come in to let us know, as the audience, on what the country is doing already in terms of combating trafficking. We also invited foreign embassies to come in and to let us know the situation of their own people working in Brunei. And then if there are ways where we can work together and to improve the situation of trafficking in Brunei per se. And then we also are involved in the ASEAN Forum on Migrant Labors. So this is as recent as last year, 2021, because of COVID-19. And it's where we discuss and provide recommendations on the ASEAN level. So the focus last year has always been on the response and towards for the migrant workers in terms of pandemic. Sorry. And then with the recovery and labor migration in post-pandemic future. So we focus more on delivering recommendations in terms of workers' access to health, healthcare, access to information, labor rights and access to justice, social protection, access to relief and income support, and also rights to return and reintegration. So a little bit about human trafficking in Brunei. There are at the moment about 140,000 foreign workers in Brunei, mainly from Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh, and China. And then at the moment, we are actually almost downgraded to tier 3, but then due to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, we remain as tier 2 watch list for the 3rd consecutive year, because Brunei is still a transit and destination country for human trafficking. So most cases, as I mentioned earlier, are with regards to the withholding of identity documents, which is a very common practice. So a lot of workers coming here, they do not have access to their own passports, and they are not able to move about freely because of that. And then there's also the withholding of wages, there's contract switching, physical and sexual abuse, as well as prostitution, forced labor, and domestic servitude, as well as human smuggling that leads to human trafficking cases. And what happened is that with regards to the trafficking report since last year, although there are a lot of improvement being done by the government, for example, we now have the interagency team to investigate all the trafficking cases, and then there are more funds to dedicate male and female trafficking shelters, interagency public relations task force to raise awareness with regards to trafficking and labor rights, and produce sample translated in various languages, as well as the more a production of SOPs to all government anti-trafficking stakeholders. But then again, it's still not enough because it does not demonstrate overall increased efforts because Brunei still do not formally identify any cases of trafficking despite the significant number of migrant workers in Brunei. And then we still did not prosecute or convict any traffickers under the trafficking statute. And we continued to detain, deport, and charge potential victims. So these are the points of improvement that we see that is still lacking, as also reported by the TIP report last year. And we also have the Trafficking and Smuggling Persons Order for 2004 and 2009 in terms of protecting the migrant workers in Brunei. But then, as I've mentioned earlier, there is still no prosecution. So prosecuting the case of human trafficking in Brunei is still quite challenging. So that's the area that we see needs improvement in terms of trafficking in Brunei situation. So there's other regulations on the trafficking in Brunei. The fine is not exceeding 100,000, and it's also whipping. These are all within the employment order, as well as the Trafficking and Smuggling of Persons Order in 2004. So based on there's also research done which involved the government official prosecutors as well as the embassy representatives and non-government organization workers, which included, which focus on the criminal justice system response in identifying, investigating, and prosecuting human trafficking crimes in Brunei. So the challenges are always in identifying the case itself. Because victims are often hidden. Usually in human trafficking, there's no freedom of movement, and identification sometimes happens when victims are engaged with criminal activities. That's the only time it's easier to identify them. And then most victims often refuse to cooperate as well because they are not assured that it's going to be a best option for them, and also the worries about repatriation. And some cases are still compile evidence of human trafficking still fall under non-trafficking charges. So again, this reiterated what I've mentioned earlier, that it's not easy to prosecute any case of trafficking in Brunei. And so based on the case study, women domestic workers are experiencing abuse, for example, in Brunei, and they are often, in a way, in a loss of hope to get justice for the case that they have faced. For example, this abuse case that happened back in 2013. So what can we do to improve that situation? We see the need for more awareness in terms of we need to improve understanding on forms of trafficking first. So we learn and then we act together and also share the information so that more people will be more aware on forms of trafficking. So when we recognize the form of trafficking, then we can take more action, and so that we can protect each other better. For Brunei, the hotline number is always 993, which is straight to the Royal Brunei Police Force. And then we advise everyone to do the research on human trafficking as well, and be aware of trafficking footprints, because what we consume are often sometimes product of trafficking without us realizing. So because there are demands for example, fast fashion, then trafficking occurs in this supply chain. And then, so if we are more aware, then we can reduce the demand for this kind of products. And again, act and be nice to everyone, and then share share and spark a conversation, not just share on human trafficking issues, but also checked on the migrant workers who are connected to you. Perhaps they did not know that they are victims as well. So yeah, we all encourage everyone to also share on social media with regards to cases of, information on what human trafficking is about, and so that more people will understand the forms of trafficking. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Naj. Thank you so much. So Naj gave us a sense in her presentation, but I wanted to go back to you, Boots, because you mentioned in your conversation that sometimes people in casinos and other places are trafficked. Is there a way that someone who's visiting a casino or going to a restaurant or going to a location to detect that someone is a victim of trafficking? What would you recommend to the average Cambodian or the average Southeast Asian who really wants to help someone but isn't sure how to identify that someone may be a victim?
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's a good question. If you suspect that there is a victim or there's potential traffic victim, you can report to the local police, and then they can, investigate, and protections and assistance will be provided, and also to the victim. And for sure, the credentiality of the reporter will be kept secretly. And of course, Cambodia is a member of it's called Palermo Protocol, is the international legal instruments to address human trafficking in persons, and we are obliged to follow the guidances. We treat the suspect or presumed victim, and we provide protections to them like the victims until there is a new determination of victim. So what the general citizens can do is to report to the police, to the competent authority, including the local police, the chief of commune, the chief of village, authority who is in charge of women's and children issues. So those people who can identify whether the person is a victim or not, and protections and assistance can be given immediately.
That's excellent advice. And I would just say, if you're in a place of business, to our audience, if you're in a place of business and you suspect that someone is a victim of trafficking, I wouldn't engage directly with that person or that employer. Take your concerns or your suspicions to the police, as Put said, and let the police investigate the situation. Yeah. And Naj, in her presentation, shared that phone number that people can call. And I was delighted to see that there were a number of US companies that have collaborated to help make that number a success. Do you know the history of that, Naj? How did US companies come to have a partnership with Brunei?
Sorry, can you repeat that, the partnership with?
On one of the slides, you had a phone number that people could call. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
And there was a list of US companies in the same slide. Can you expand a little bit on the relationship between those US companies and that phone number?
Yeah. Actually, it's a separate section. The hotline number is just for local in Brunei, the 993 numbers. With regards to the logos companies, those are companies who have history of reported claims on trafficking within their supply chain. So, but then they actually have made some action to address the issues. So their actions has actually quite impactful in the way that a lot of more businesses started to take more actions in inspecting their own supply chain as well. So yeah.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic to hear. Now, Naj was mentioning a little bit about what ASEAN is doing to combat human trafficking. And I know you've been involved in developing bilateral agreements between ASEAN member states on this topic. And I could list some very long titles, but I'll let you discuss with our audience some of the work that you and Cambodia have been doing with ASEAN to look at this issue from a multi-regional perspective.
Thank you. You need to understand the the mandate of the Ministry of Women's Affairs, because basically I represent the Ministry of Women's Affairs. So if you look at the history of Cambodians, I would say Ministry of Women's Affairs, probably one of the first government agencies, since 1996 or 7 or something, that one of the they initiate activities to combat trafficking in persons. So at the national levels, at the country level, Ministry of Women's Affairs is the vice chair of the National Committee for Counter of Trafficking in Persons. It's 2 vice chairs. The National Committee is the high-ranking committees, which its compositions comprise of high levels officials, government officials, and chaired by the deputy prime ministers. I look at the ASEAN levels. This national committee is the highest one compared to the mechanism at the levels. So at the Mekong levels, the Mekong levels, they established one task force. It's called the Commit Task Force, and the Ministry of Women's Affairs, which my department, the Department of Legal Protections, is the secretariat represent Cambodia in the Mekong regions to combat trafficking in persons. And at the ASEAN levels, the Ministry of Women's Affairs has 2 seats in 2 different sectoral bodies at the ASEAN. One is the ACWC, with the ASEAN Commissions on the Promotions and Protections of Women and Children. So basically, it's comprised representative from the Ministry of Women's Affairs, which in charge of women's, and another representative from the Social Affairs Ministry, which represent the child. And another sectoral body is called ACW, it's the ASEAN Committee on Women. So these 2 sectoral bodies of ASEAN works to, actively to address human trafficking, especially women and children, and also to promote gender equality at the ASEAN levels. So I'm going to talk about the ASEAN levels. After 2015, after the leader of the ASEAN country signed the conventions on trafficking in persons, so they create the regional plan of actions. Before the regional plan of actions, they conduct studies to identify gaps, challenges, and good practices that can lead to the national plan of actions. That study is called Laws and Policy and Practice related to the identifications and treatment of victims of trafficking, especially in women and children. And at the time, I represented Cambodia to conduct this study. So at the regional, at the national levels, each ASEAN member was supposed to have that studies, and then the finding of the study will be synergized and include at the national levels, and then they develop the national plan of action. Basically, it's the framework and principle. You already touched on the points. They include 4 P's: prevention, protection, prosecutions, and partnerships. So this is at the ASEAN levels. And also after that, the ASEAN, the ACWC, the Asian Commissions, the Promotion, Protections of Women and Children, also developed, it's called the gender sensitive guidelines to handle human trafficking, especially on women and children, because women and children, when handling trafficking cases related to women victim and children victim, you need to tailor your procedures, your language, and especially the court proceeding. That you have to make sure that those women are completely and fully able to participate in those proceedings, the court proceedings, to hold the perpetrator accountable and provide the comprehensive protections to the women and children. So this is at the ASEAN levels. For the bilateral, between Cambodia and other countries, yes, I actively at the time engage in develop the bilateral agreements between Cambodia and Thailand, and also the Cambodia and Vietnam. These two countries that are actively involved to develop the agreements, and also at the Mekong levels, because at the Mekong level, they have it's called SPA, it's the sub-regional plan of actions to combat trafficking in persons. And as I mentioned earlier, Department of Legal Protection is the secretariat and represent Cambodians to the commit task force. So yes, my teams and I take part in, and at the moment we are in the process of creating or updates the new plan of actions, because the SPA 4, the sub-regional plan of actions number 4, has already been outdated. So we are we're gonna develop the new one based on the challenges, especially to look at the possibility and the new emerging issue that we have to think carefully. And yeah, this is what I've
and that
done.
That action plan, were all 10 member states part of the development of the ASEAN action plan?
For the conventions, yes, all as in the 10 member states, because for the convention is a legally binding legal instrument. So we need consensus, all the ASEAN's consensus.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. As I was saying earlier, there has to be partnership. So if everyone's on board, the likeliness of success goes up and is much higher. And Naj, I'm very interested, you were involved in the ASEAN Forum on Migrant Laborers. Were you personally involved in that, or was that someone else from Yas Brunei?
Actually, one of our event manager, Riani, is part of that, representing Yas Brunei for the forum.
Mm-hmm. And are you aware of any success stories that came out of that forum?
For the success is that they're able to gather all these important people in one sitting. So that's a success. With regards to recommendations, although it's not really significant ones, but there are cases where things get speed up because with the recommendations as well. So for example, in the tip report in Brunei, there is action by the government in doing the translation work to improve inclusivity for migrant workers in Brunei. So that's one of the ways it have indirectly or directly contributed to some positive actions by the government in enforcing the combating of human trafficking in Brunei. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that progress is being made and things are moving in the right direction. So Put, we've been talking about human trafficking for this conversation, and members of the audience are thinking, well, what can I do today? What could I do this week? What could I do in 2022 to make an impact? What would you recommend for people who are interested in making a difference?
Everyone has a role to combat trafficking in persons, refers to the previous question, when they can detect or they suspect that there is the trafficking cases, that they can report to the police, and that's what they can do. They can, advocate or push the governments to put more attention to invest in trafficking in persons, especially to change, the perspective, or I would say the paradigm. A lot of not specifically about the ASEAN regions, but a lot of governments tend to think that migrants are burdens to the country, especially regarding to the security issues and political issues. And some government try to use migrant workers to politicize, for their political agenda or political rhetorics. But you have to think that migrants, especially during the pandemics, like a lot of the citizens, the old citizens are staying at home, but migrant workers are working out there to keep the economy going, to push the economy. In some countries, even impose the national vaccinations, which migrant workers, especially those who are undocumented, put at the last list of those who get the vaccines. This is the kind of discrimination as well. So you push your government and change your behaviors, and also the government stop discriminations against migrant workers, especially to think that they are the driving force of the economy, push the economy, not put the burdens of the economy or your security issues. It's not at all. Actually, some migrant workers, undocumented migrant workers, they are scared of police. They are scared of, some are really scared of committing wrongdoing, because they are afraid of getting detained or arrested by the police. They're scared of that.
Thank you for that. And Naj, I'm going to ask you the same question. You definitely addressed this in your presentation, but we have people in the audience who are wondering, what can I do today, this week, this year? What would your recommendation be for them?
I think, as Mr. Puth has already mentioned earlier, that we first need to be acknowledging the human trafficking, what human trafficking is, the forms of human trafficking, so that we must not just think human trafficking issues is not part of local problems, because as much as we wanted to make that line between local and non-local, for example, in terms of workers' contribution, those who are actually working to get the economy going are those workers working outside of their countries. And so it doesn't hurt to be a little bit nicer to this hardworking population, and to also be mindful of their plight, working outside of their comfort zone, outside of their home countries to earn a living. And so first and foremost, we need to highlight that, and also to make them visible, and to recognize their contribution within our own community.
Thank you so much. Well, to my guests and our audience, we've been talking about this very important topic for almost an hour, and we just barely scratched the surface, as we say in English. I had 40 more questions for both of our guests. There's so much more I wanted to get to, but we ran out of time. But I do want to say to our audience, if this is, well, I want to say two things. First, I want to say something that was important to me today is to convey that there are ASEAN officials, there are government bureaucrats, there are young people, there are so many different types of people who care about this issue and are making an impact in different ways. And I encourage you, if this is a topic of interest to you, reach out to the US mission to ASEAN. We can put you in touch with other members of YSEALI or academics. We have programs, we have grants. We could help you make a difference. If you want to start an organization similar to Yas Brunei in your own country, we can put you in touch with Naj and she can give you lots of recommendations. If you're interested in doing government work or making an impact on the government level and you want more advice, I'm going to say we could possibly put you in touch with Put. I know you're very, very busy, but I'm sure you'd be happy to mentor someone who really cares about this issue. So if this is your issue and you're passionate about it, please reach out to us. We'd love to put you in contact with mentors and people who could help you to make that difference, because we want to have an impact together. And as I was saying before, the US government understands that we have to create partnerships to solve this very, very big challenge. And with that, I'm going to close the show. I'm going to say thank you again to our wonderful guests. You shared so much information about this important topic, but there's so much more to go. There's so much we could learn from you, and let's keep the conversation going. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the show and say goodbye to our audience. Thanks so much for joining us. And until the next time, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.